continuamos con nuestra programación de Visiones del Desarrollo 2025 desde Sevilla, España. En esta ocasión vamos a estar conversando con un grupo de ministros de países caribeños, del Caribe angloparlante, por lo que vamos a tener esta conversación en inglés. Por supuesto, van a tener subtítulos disponibles. Y quisiera darle la bienvenida a nuestro panel. Welcome. I would like to welcome all of you to Visions for Development, Visiones para el Desarrollo, this conversation held here in Sevilla as part of a framework of talking about development and talking about financing. And in this particular case, we are focusing on the Caribbean, a region where I am from as a native of Puerto Rico. But we are holding the conversation in English as we're talking to members of English-speaking Caribbean islands. And I'd like to welcome first the Minister of Trinidad, Finance and Trinidad and Tobago, Tancoo. We're also joined by the Honorable Tancoo. We're also joined by the Honorable Ryan Straughn, Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs, and Investment. Also joining us is the Honorable Michael Halkitis, Bahamas Minister of Economic Affairs, and Dr. Stacy Richards-Kennedy on behalf of CAF, who is the Regional Manager for the Caribbean for CAF. And I'd like for us to really focus on the riches, on the virtues of the Caribbean, but also on what are some of those very unique and completely different and diverse set of challenges when it comes to development and financing in these Caribbean countries. And I'll start the conversation with you and our questions with you, Minister Tancoo. As I understand it, Trinidad and Tobago has a deep connection, or its economy has a deep connection to the energy sector. I'm sure that brings along a series of challenges when it comes to diversifying the economy and to financing a more diverse economy. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are some of the factors that play into those challenges and how to attract financing that is focused on that kind of diversification in order to further development and, of course, build resilience, which is so important to the Caribbean?
Well, thank you very much for your question. Trinidad and Tobago has a long history of resilience and reliance on the energy sector. We were initially an oil-based economy. We have now transitioned substantially to a predominantly gas-based economy. But there's obvious need, given international events, given the region's movement away from reliance on mineral fuels, oil and gas in particular, that the Trinidad and Tobago needs to diversify its base. We have spent the last 10 years, my government, who's recently been elected, we have spent the last 10 years developing plans that will transition Trinidad and Tobago away from oil and gas while maintaining a level of engagement with the sector. So we are continuing to promote oil and gas, but we are looking to expand the non-energy sector. We are looking to several advantages which Trinidad and Tobago already has. We have advantages along the lines of the shipping. We are geopolitically perfectly located for shipping, for the development of Latin America and the Caribbean, for tourist potentials, education, sport, health, cultural tourism, etc. And those initiatives are what the new government is pushing forward in a new mandate from the population of Trinidad and Tobago to develop Trinidad and Tobago's economy away from total reliance on oil and gas and into a wide variety of other initiatives.
And part of what all of the islands in the Caribbean do have in common is the challenges that have to do with climate change. Building climate resilience, as you were talking about, is something that is historic, has been part of the nature and the needs that are existing in the region. But I want to dive even deeper into what are some of the initiatives, and I'll bring you into the conversation, Minister Straughn. I'm curious about attracting or compelling people to be invested in climate finance. What can you tell us about the need that exists in terms of restructuring or reforming the financial architecture that comes, from around the world, and furthering Barbados in particular's sustainable development goals through financing?
Thanks very much. I think what we've focused on over the course of the last few years under the Straughn initiative is how do we reform the international financial architecture to address not just the challenges that small states face in relation to responding to the climate crisis, but equally investing in the continued development and being able to achieve the sustainable development goals. And again, in the backdrop of this Finance for the Development Conference, it's important to appreciate that with the polycrises that the world is facing, small states need the flexibility and the policy space to be able to continue to deliver for the benefit of the citizens. And therefore, we have been very, very strong advocates in relation to the need to respond to the climate crisis and to be able to fast track the building of resilience. So we have taken it a fairly aggressive approach in relation to having the building of resilience upfront by being able to repurpose our catastrophe fund, which only responded after an event, and therefore having identified those areas that we know are priorities, we're going to fast track that. And therefore, that is part of our solution in order to ensure that we can deliver. We've done a lot of work with respect to debt swaps to try to free up fiscal space in order to fast track development, the development agenda for the country. And we continue to work with MDBs to be able to find more innovative solutions to bring more capital to respond to the challenges. And therefore, through our advocacy and certainly the support of entities like CAF, we see this as a strategic realignment, if you like, in relation to how we can deepen the integration process in the region and equally build resilience for our people.
And speaking of building resilience, I mean, specifically what we're talking about is high vulnerability because of hurricanes, because of natural disasters, and also the impacts of sea level rise. Those are factors that play into all of these countries, that play into the Caribbean. In the case of the Bahamas, Minister Halkitis, I'm curious about, specifically in the Bahamas, you have an income status that excludes the Bahamas from access to concessional financing. How do you manage or how do you navigate that, what some might see as a financial trap, and ensure that there is access to adequate, to fair climate financing?
Well, firstly, we pay a lot of attention to resilience. Resilience in terms of when we build our infrastructure, as we now pursue more use of renewables in our energy mix, and as well resilience in our finances. And so we underwent a double crisis a few years ago. We had a very, very devastating hurricane, Hurricane Dorian, followed on by the COVID-19 pandemic, which severely impacted our tourism sector and the public finances. Our goal over the past 4 years has been to rebuild that fiscal headroom, reducing deficits, reducing our debt to GDP ratio, so that we are more in a better position financially to be able to respond as a country. In addition, we have pursued contingent financing with the help of some of the multi-development banks, multilateral banks, because we understand that in the aftermath of a crisis, it's critically important to restore some sense of normalcy as quickly as possible. That is, to be able to get in and clean up and begin to rebuild, and so that you start to get the economy moving again. And so we are encouraging more of the multilateral institutions to support things like contingent lines, so that the financing is in place. In the event of a disaster, you can begin to draw down right away. And we continue to support the inclusion of catastrophe clauses in whether it be loans from the multilaterals, loans from the banks, or when countries decide to go to the international bond market. We're encouraging the inclusion of those clauses that would see a pause in principal and interest payment while the country begins to recover.
I have to mention, there's sound around the room because we are joined by ministers really from all over. And also you yourself, Minister Tancoo, are the president, the first president of the CAF Board of Directors from the Caribbean, which speaks so highly to the integration of the Caribbean and the prioritization of the Caribbean within CAF. And so I wanted to ask Dr. Richardson-Kennedy about precisely what are those pillars? How do you see them expanding that are so important to CAF and how they're working in the different Caribbean nations?
Thank you so much for that question. CAF, as you know, we are firmly committed to regional integration and sustainable development. And we have been focusing our efforts on serving as the green bank and the bank for inclusive and sustainable growth across the region. But what that means with our expansion in the Caribbean is that we also have to adapt all of our solutions, all of our knowledge products, all of our financial instruments to take into account the unique characteristics and vulnerabilities of small island states. And so that's exactly what we've been doing to ensure that we tailor our development financing and our solutions to the realities on the ground in each of the Caribbean territories. And while many see the Caribbean as one grouping and one block, we do have quite a bit of diversity among the various islands. And so that in itself requires a lot of flexibility, which CAF is known for, as well as having a very client-focused approach, where we meet frequently with our various counterparts in the different countries, and we ensure that we're listening to their challenges, to their needs, and then internally mobilizing all of our support from across the different sectors, as well as through our finance teams, and seeing how we can be agile as well as flexible in terms of providing the solutions that they need to advance their development priorities.
And I want to bring in Minister Halkitis, because as you talk about the very unique or specific challenges, one thing that I find striking is the amount of islands that are in the Bahamas. The Bahamas is a country that is made up of thousands of islands. That means that taking infrastructure of energy, education, all kinds of resources to the different islands presents a challenge that other countries would never imagine that could be faced. If you can speak a little bit about those specific challenges, how you overcome them, and how to attract or implement what are solutions when it comes to building resilience, when it comes to attracting climate financing, and whether the solutions that are out there are actually working out in the Bahamas.
It is a unique challenge. It's also an advantage because it works for us, for example, in our tourism sector, where we can advertise the Bahamas as not just one location, but several locations because we have various islands. But the challenge is, as you have said, the duplication of the infrastructure throughout the islands. And in a country, if it's an archipelago, if it's one land mass, citizens, no matter where they live in the country, they expect the same level of service and the same quality of infrastructure wherever they might be. So what we have done, particularly right now, we are undergoing an extensive airport infrastructure redevelopment, and so we put it in one package. And so we're also doing a similar thing with healthcare infrastructure, where we take one umbrella and we say this umbrella is for airport redevelopment, and this airport is for, this envelope is for healthcare redevelopment, and we put in place the project management, et cetera, to make sure that it can be implemented efficiently. One of the things is to highlight, just as you said, highlight amongst the financial institutions and the multilateral agencies, the same thing that you said. The Bahamas is a wide space, an archipelago, and so even in the event that we are, for example, hit by a hurricane. There are instances when one portion of the country is hit, another is not hit, but in the public relations and when it's reported that the Bahamas
Totally
has been
Yeah.
devastated. When in reality, because we're so dispersed, it could very well be that the impact is not as great. And so we continue to advocate for that sort of understanding. But what we have been seeking to do in recent time is not take so much of a siloed approach, but look at it overall. We're developing infrastructure. In this case, we have an aggressive airport infrastructure program. Yes, we're rebuilding, but we have to rebuild with resilience. We have to diversify the geographical location of our investment because it helps with our industry as well.
And Minister Straughn, I'm curious about, you talked about building resilience, you talked about those challenges as they exist today and looking into the past. I wonder if you could speak to, of course, we are within the frame of the UN Conference on Financing for Development, and we are here with CAF. What is the role of multilateral banking, and can you speak a little bit about the partnerships that have been crucial in Barbados and some of those more innovative financial instruments that have worked out?
Well, certainly we see the benefits of working with entities like CAF in being able to fundamentally de-risk some of the private investment that can take place, not just in Barbados, but across the region. And we see that in both the commercial side, the true commercial sides, but really at the individual and household level. In the Caribbean, there's tremendous talent, there's tremendous human capital. And therefore the ability of multilateral banks like CAF to come in and provide specific resources, especially in de-risking mortgages for low-income families, to have climate-resilient homes, being able to generate energy, as we are trying to do in Barbados with our whole program, is important to ensure that the growth in the region is as inclusive as possible. Because we do have lots of interest from investors, institutional investors, to participate in the energy sector, in the tourism sector, and the like. But being able to ensure that we can include ordinary citizens, we believe that as we are seeking to de-risk at the institutional level, there are opportunities for MDBs to be able to help lift the fortunes of ordinary citizens. And therefore we are focusing on these areas because that is what is going to be truly important for the long-term sustainable development of the region. And therefore the more included people are in the success and in the growth prospects of the region, we know that will redound to the benefit of everyone institutionally. So we are working on these types of engagements to be able to unlock. There's a lot of liquidity within our banking system. There's lots relatively high savings rates in our banking institutions that we now need to leverage to the benefit of ordinary citizens and to be able to deploy that for the strategic long-term development of the region. So we see a twinning of that the domestic resource mobilization, unlocking those resources, working with MDBs to reduce risk in order to ensure that our citizens can truly participate in the success of the economy.
And Minister Tancoo, I'm curious, because of your relationship with CAF and because Trinidad and Tobago was one of the first members within the Caribbean that is not part of Latin America or considered Latin America when that expansion of CAF happened, what do you celebrate as the greatest successes or the most promising part of that relationship, looking into the future and looking back since Trinidad and Tobago joined CAF?
It's generally the development agenda. Development has multiple sides, multiple aspects, and generally we would have spoken about the capital requirements and the financial obligations. But courtesy of CAF, we now have the opportunity to focus on the human side, on the environment side, quality of life sides, in addition to not just to the financial aspects. So CAF has allowed us to view development as a development objective for the country, for the people, for society generally, and for long-term planning. The advent of some of the initiatives, the Debt for Nature, the biodiversity credits, those kinds of opportunities provided to Caribbean countries generally did not exist before. Some of the other multilateral lending agencies would have focused essentially on the financial criteria. And now we are seeing, courtesy of CAF, even some of those other institutions now gravitating towards the broader developmental objectives. So I think that is one of the critical things that I would celebrate with regards to CAF's involvement in Trinidad and Tobago and with the Caribbean generally. Their combination of societal and environmental development as part of the broader development objective.
Human aspect of it all. Well,
Yes, ma'am.
I will allow you all to join the rest of the parties here present. Thank you so much for this very engaging conversation and for bringing light to those unique challenges, objectives, goals, and virtues of our region. Because as I said, I also consider myself una caribeña. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the
Thank
opportunity.
you. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en esta edición de Visiones del Desarrollo desde Sevilla. Tendremos muchas más pláticas a lo largo de que pasen estos días. Gracias por acompañarnos.